welcome to Serious About Rugby League. Today I'm going to run through the top 20 Rugby League moments of the last decade. Coming in at number 20, I've got the record breaker Cameron Smith. Now the Melbourne Storm star has broken two significant NRL records this year, the first of which was in April when he became the NRL's all-time top point scorer, breaking Hazem El Masri's record. Smith then went one better a few months later by becoming the only NRL player in history to surpass 400 games. In at 19, and again I've kind of rolled two into one again here, but I think it's fair to say that the last few years have seen the international game in Rugby League really shaken up by a few of the Tier 2 nations. And I think this really started in 2016 when Scotland produced a brilliant performance against the Kiwis in Workington. They drew the game 18-all, and I think that gave a lot of hope to the other Tier 2 nations that they could challenge the big boys. Then a year later, Fiji went one better than the Scots by beating New Zealand at the 2017 World Cup. It was a huge shock, the Kiwis crashing out. And again, like I said, kind of two rolled into one, but coming in at 19 is both Scotland's and Fiji's performance against the Kiwis. At 18 now, and again it's been difficult to roll this one down into one particular moment because the last few years have seen the women's game really grow on both sides of the world, both the Women's Super League and the Women's NRL making great progress. But I think if I had to pick out one defining moment, it would have been at the end of this season, the 2019 season, when we saw the Women's Grand Final in Super League between Leeds Rhinos and Castlewood Tigers, televised on TV. Now I know this isn't the first women's game to be broadcast live on TV, but it just seemed like a real defining moment, and they certainly didn't disappoint. It was a terrific game, Leeds eventually winning out 2012, but it got great viewing figures, and hopefully we'll see more women's games broadcast on TV over the next few years. Number 17 now, and probably one that Saints fans don't really want to remember. I'm going to go back to 2012 for this one, and a Super League clash between St Helens and Catalan Dragons, and boy, what a game it was. I think St Helens fans' favourite Super League moment of all time has to be their wide to west moment, but they were actually kind of wide to wested by the Dragons on this occasion as they scored like the ultimate buzzer beater it was. Catalans were actually trailing St Helens 32-28 at the time. The hooter sounded, Catalans threw the ball all the way from the left side of the field to the right, all the way back from the right hand side of the field to the left, eventually landing in the hands of Daryl Millard. He stepped Johnny Lomax, put the ball down, a long video ref review, the try was given, and then it was down to Scott Giroux to convert from the touchline, and Catalans won the game. It was a terrific, terrific moment. Definitely one of the standout Super League tries of the last decade, and certainly one people in that ground that day will never forget. Number 16 now, and I will make these moments more specific as we get down the list, but this is another broad one. It's the rise of PDRL. If you don't know what that is, that's Physical Disability Rugby League, and it's been a terrific, terrific introduction into our game. It's a full running, almost full contact version of Rugby League, some touch version depending on the disability of the player, but it's Rugby League for people with physical disabilities, and it's provided terrific opportunities for people who never thought they would get them, and it's really been spearheaded by big Rugby League fan and comedian Adam Hills, and we've actually got a full league now in Super League, and we've even had a World Club Challenge with the Warrington boys going over to Australia to play South Sydney. The rise of PDRL is terrific, and honestly, it's terrific to watch. If you've not seen it, definitely go and get it. Definitely go and see a game. Number 15 now, and we have Salford's incredible run to the 2019 Super League Grand Final. I think it's something that none of us saw happening, even as we got to the last few months of the season, but it was always a very open Super League season, and Salford were able to put that club record breaking run together to eventually finish third in Super League. They then beat Castleford in the playoffs. They toppled Wigan at the DW Stadium, which nobody thought would happen. Headed by Jackson Hastings, the eventual Man of Steel, and led by Ian Watson, the coach. Salford's run to that grand final could never have been predicted. They did fall at the final hurdle to St Helens, but again I think it's really given hope to a lot of the teams probably below the leading pack that they can get to the major finals. Number 14 now, and I have to recognise London's heroics in the £28 million game. To be able to go over to Toronto and beat the Canadian outfit in the backyard, they were real big underdogs in that final, and Danny Ward's men went over there, defied the odds. It was a game with no tries. I think it eventually finished 4-2 in the end to London, but it was a terrific defensive effort. If I remember right, the Toronto got over the line 3 or 4 times, and London's last-ditch defence, their willingness to work for each other, they managed to stop the Wolfpack scoring and eventually won the game, and they earned their place in Super League where they more than held their own. Were unlucky to be relegated in the end, but yeah, that performance in that £28 million game has to be recognised and is one of the standout performances of the last decade. In at 13 now, and we go over to Australia and the 2014 State of Origin series. This was a very important series because at this point many people were questioning whether the New South Wales Blues would ever win another series. Queensland had won 8 in a row. They had the golden foursome of Billy Slater, of Jonathan Thurston, of Cooper Cronk, of Cameron Smith, and Queensland just looked unbeatable. But led by Jared Hayne, New South Wales were able to eventually overcome Queensland. And the scenes at ANZ Stadium that day in Sydney were terrific. It was great to finally see the Blues get that win. You could see what it meant to so many of the players. Queensland's dominance ended. That run from 2006 was over, and that was a very, very memorable moment, a very emotional moment, and probably the moment in State of Origin of the last decade. Number 12 now, and we're heading up towards some even bigger moments, and this one is one that England fans probably will never forget. The 2017 World Cup final, Australia of course, heavy favourites, 6-0 up into the second half, England more than holding their own. It was a tie, it was tense, it was nervy, and then we saw the moment. England had been looking, had been testing Australia down the middle, and they finally decided to throw it out wide. Callum Watkins makes what is seemingly a clean break, only for Josh Dugan to get that little clip, swipe him, tap his ankle just at the last minute. Watkins just was unable to keep his feet, went down, Australia dived on him, and in that moment our chances of World Cup glory was gone. Many people thought if Watkins had just been that little bit quicker, you've got to give credit to Dugan, it was terrific defence, but if Watkins was able to get away, he would have fed on the inside, England would have scored, most likely under the posts, and then 6-all, who knows what would have happened in the final quarter of that game, but it wasn't meant to be, and Josh Dugan's ankle tap will be forever remembered, probably more by England fans than Australia fans, but that makes the list unfortunately. In at 11, and it's more England heartbreak, we go back to the World Cup before that in 2013, and we go to the semi-final, an unbelievable game at Wembley, England versus New Zealand, just two really evenly matched teams, two teams full-blooded, high intensity. It was just a terrific international match, probably one of the best, if not the best international game I've seen in my lifetime. It was Sam Burgess against Sonny Bill, and unfortunately it was Sean Johnson stepping around Kevin Sinfield. England were leading that game 18-14, going into the final 40 seconds, New Zealand throw the ball out, Sinfield overshoots, Johnson steps inside, scores, converts, New Zealand win 2018, make the World Cup final, and Sean Johnson's magic got them there, and I for one don't really want to relive that moment. Number 10 now, and probably as we get into the top 10, this again, when it's a moment, it's kind of moments, but it's the Sydney Roosters back-to-back NRL titles. Now, winning one NRL title is hard enough, but winning 2 in a row is almost impossible, as we've seen down the years, but the Roosters under Trent Robinson have been able to do that in the last couple of years. The 2018 final against Melbourne Storm, a terrific game that they just got over the line. They've always been a big game team of the Roosters, and with so many experienced players in there, the likes of Boyd Cordner, and then this year Cooper Cronk coming in there, spearheading the side and leading them around the park. He was the man. and the Roosters beat a Canberra Raiders team with a heavy English contingent in another terrific final. But again, the Roosters, James Tedesco, he's been the main man. He produced the big moments when they matter over the last few years, and he did again in this year's final. The Roosters have been a dominant force, also coming over here and winning the World Club Challenge against Wigan. And yeah, they have been terrific in the NRL over the last couple of years, and their back-to-back NRL titles make the top 10. Number 9 now, and probably the most recent thing to happen on this list, is of course Sonny Bill Williams signing for the Toronto Wolfpack. Now, it just shows you how big it is that this has just literally happened, and it's made 9th place in moments of the decade. He's not even yet played for the Wolfpack, but the signing has made headlines all around the world. You name it, England, Australia, New Zealand, obviously Canada, America, even further afield. He's such a superstar of not just rugby league, rugby union, of just world sport. And for him to come to Super League is huge for this competition, but it's even bigger for Toronto Wolfpack, who are trying to make waves in the world of rugby league. Number 8 now, and we go to the 2019 Challenge Cup, and Catalans' superb run, which saw them make the final and become the first non-English team to win the Challenge Cup. It saw Catalans win their first piece of major silverware, and it was a big moment for French Rugby League. The semi-final, they faced a heavily fancied St Helens team, who were not only favourites for the Challenge Cup at that point, they were actually favourites for the treble. They were running away with things in Super League, and Justin Holbrook's men looked almost unbeatable going into that final. But Catalans produced a fantastic first half performance. They ran away with the game. Then in the final against Warrington, despite that brilliant semi-final display against St Helens, they still went in as underdogs. But they were the better team in the final, perhaps not the best final there's ever been, but yeah, they did the job. They were the better team. Tony Guijo, brilliant performance from him, man of the match, Lance Todd trophy. They were able to get over the line, win their first major trophy, such a big accomplishment for the Dragons, and again, like I say, a massive moment for French Rugby League. Number 7 now, we go back to the international game, and again, another quite recent moment is Tonga's victory against Australia this year, 2019. It was in fact a Tonga invitational side because of issues earlier in the year, but still, it was still Tonga, it was still Australia, and it was just a week after beating Great Britain. Tonga came in against the Kangaroos, and they were brilliant. They were the better side. It didn't look likely at one point that Australia had ran into an early lead, but Tavita Pangai Jr.'s winning try sent Eden Park in New Zealand into raptures. It was a sea of red. The Tongans so passionate, such great support, and they got that victory. And who's to say now that they might not even go on and win the World Cup in England? In at number 6 now, and we go back to 2016 and the NRL Grand Final. Such a brilliant final, and it was the final that saw Cronulla Sharks finally end that premiership drought. They were absolutely terrific in that final. They were the underdogs against a superbly talented Melbourne side. As we went into that final few moments, the Sharks winning 14-12. You just thought Melbourne were going to find a way over. They'd been the better team in that second half, but Cronulla hung on. They achieved history. Paul Gallen lifted that trophy in front of a packed crowd at ANZ Stadium, and the Sharks, against all the odds, finally ended their premiership wait. They lifted the NRL, and that comes in at number 6. Number 5 now, and a little closer to home. Wembley Stadium, 2016, and it was the end of another major drought, an even longer drought. Hull FC ending their long wait for it was their first ever win at Wembley. The famous song can no longer be sung that you've never won at Wembley. Hull, thanks mainly down to that brilliant tackle at the end from Danny Houghton, tackle 52. They won the Challenge Cup, the 2016 Challenge Cup against Warrington. They came from behind, all looked lost when Warrington raced into a lead, a couple of scores ahead. But Mahe Fanua got over to start with, and then he set up Jamie Shaw for the try, and then at the end looked like Ben Curry had won it for Warrington. Danny Houghton's tackle dislodged the ball. Hull prevailed 12-10. They finally won at Wembley. They lifted the Challenge Cup. Lee Radford, hometown boy, had led the Black and Whites to Challenge Cup glory at the country's national stadium. Number 4 now, and we go back the year before that to 2015, and it was the year of the Leeds Rhinos. Having won the Challenge Cup with a 50-0 rout of Hull KR at Wembley, Tom Briscoe scored 5 tries. Incredibly, that isn't the moment from that season. Leeds went into the final day of the regular season fighting for the League Leaders Shield along with Wigan, and as they trailed Huddersfield in the final moments, it looked like the Rhinos' treble, looked like the grasp on that treble had slipped away. Huddersfield were going to get over the line, they were going to get the victory against Leeds, until a moment that none of us will forget. With just seconds, literally seconds remaining on the clock, Danny Maguire, little chip over the top, the ball evaded Scott Griggs, Ryan Hall picked up, raced away, scored in the corner, on the hooter, won Leeds Rhinos the League Leaders Shield. The helicopter which was flying over to present the trophy to Wigan turned back round, flew back to the John Smith Stadium, and the Rhinos lifted it in quite incredible style, and that Rhino try will certainly be never forgotten by Leeds fans, and probably not by Wigan fans either. Into the top 3 now, and probably the moment of Jonathan Thurston's quite brilliant career. His North Queensland Cowboys side were trailing to Brisbane Broncos in the final moments of the NRL Grand Final, and a ball flew out wide. Thurston, part of the move that's helped Kyle Fell to level the scores in the 2015 final. Thurston with a chance to win the game from the touchline, to convert it, to write his name in the history books forever. Hit the post. At that moment, many people had their doubts. Had Jonathan Thurston blown it for the Cowboys? Well, into extra time we went. What a final it was. And 2 minutes into extra time, the ball came back to JT again. He didn't make the same mistake twice. He dropped the goal between the posts, won the Cowboys the grand final. He was the hero. You couldn't ask for a better man for the occasion. He is a legend. Now, speaking of extra time drop goals, that brings us to number 2. Now, it's hard to say that more, well in fact yes, more was probably on the line in this game. It was a £2016 million game between Hull KR and Salford, livelihoods on the line, the loser relegated, and going into the final 2 minutes of the game, Hull KR had the game in the bag, only for Salford to come back. It started with Niall Evans going over in the left corner, before they went the full length of the field from the kick-off to score in the right corner, Greg Johnson touching down on the hooter to make it 18-all. The conversion was then missed, and we went into extra time. Like I said, livelihoods on the line. Who could prevail? And it was the Red Devils. Incredibly, as people know, actually, English Rugby League fans will know, at Craven Park, it's an open stadium, it's quite windy, and if you've got that wind behind you, you can really get a kicking game going. And Gareth O'Brien knew this. He got the ball on the halfway line. Nobody was expecting it. Not the Hull KR players. Not anybody in that ground, I don't think, was expecting it. O'Brien went for it, 50 yards, the ball sailed over, it flew through the air, went between the posts, he wheeled away. The Salford fans spilled onto the field, celebrated with the players, and it was agony for Rovers. And there's that image of James Webster on the touchline. He just cannot believe it, the then Hull KR coach. But what a moment it was, and it definitely is the Super League moment of the decade. Incredible drama in the £1 million game, and Gareth O'Brien's drop goal is number 2 on the list. So here we have it, number 1, my Rugby League moment of the decade, and it is Sam Burgess' performance in the 2014 NRL Grand Final for the South Sydney Rabbitohs. Who could forget it? Sam, first tackle of the game, ran straight his international teammate on the opposite side that day for Canterbury Bulldogs, James Graham. Sam ran at him, they clashed heads, he came out of the tackle clutching his eye. As we later found out, it was a fractured eye socket. It was so painful for Sam. Not only did he play the rest of the game, he was the best player on the pitch. He made tackle after tackle, he ran the ball inconsistently, he made 200 plus metres, he was a constant threat offloading the ball, all while in excruciating pain, but it didn't deter him, and to put in that performance in such a big game was an inspiration. And as we know, the Rabbitohs went on to win that game. They won the game comfortably. Greg Inglis was instrumental. He was at the peak of his powers. It was such a good Rabbitohs side. But Sam Burgess' name was at the top of that, and he was terrific that day. And who can forget the image at the end of him crouching down, emotional. His face was a mess, but it didn't matter. He'd become arguably the biggest name in the NRL. He'd won a grand final. He'd helped the Bunnies end their 41-year drought. And his performance, Sam Burgess' performance in that 2014 NRL grand final, is my rugby league moment of the decade. That image at the end is the moment itself. Well, there you have it then, my top 20 rugby league moments of the decade. I know there'll be some in there that you feel like I've missed out. Let me know in the comments which ones you think should be in there. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.